any big karmic problems, you know, like the killing of a brahmana or something like that, or sleeping with your spiritual master's wife, or some terrible offense like that. As long as you don't have that on your karmic plate, yeah, in your karmic account, then you can attain complete self-realization in this lifetime. It's within reach. It's perfectly possible. See? So the problem is they made so many offenses to Śrīla Prabhupada by not following his instructions. They actually blocked their own progress. And then they projected that on the other devotees and said, no, you can't attain either. See? Because very few of the devotees actually had a direct connection with Śrīla Prabhupada. It was more like the rank and file devotees were connected to the temple leaders. And the temple leaders, yeah, it was a pyramid structure. So it was like middle management, you know. In any company, you have the middle management, and they're more or less just yes men for the leaders. And they don't really do anything. They just kind of serve as a conduit for instructions and information, you know, if they're doing a job right. But if they start to go against the leadership, you know, they can actually wreck the whole company. And that's what happened in ISKCON. There was a revolt of the middle managers, and they actually isolated Śrīla Prabhupada from the rank and file devotees. And then they started giving their own instructions, which were different from Śrīla Prabhupada's instructions. Yeah. So most of the devotees, they can read Śrīla Prabhupada's books, but then the guy that they have to work with every day is telling them, "Oh, actually, it doesn't mean that. It means something else." See. But Śrīla Prabhupada, if you listen to his classes, he says you can get direct knowledge of Krishna. Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness. Huh? What does that mean? Well, what does it mean to you?
To be
conscious of Krishna.
To be totally absorbed in Krishna.
Conscious of Krishna, right? Mm-hmm. Directly. Not through senses, not through mind, but direct consciousness of Krishna. That's what we're talking about. See? You can change your consciousness so that you're not conscious of this material world, but you're directly conscious of Krishna. That's Krishna consciousness. Simple, right? Oh, but the leaders of ISKCON came up with this whole big involved story about how actually it's something else. See? The real meaning is very direct and simple. Anyone who's sincere, anybody who's truthful, anyone who's simple will get it. Krishna consciousness. Okay. Fine. How do I do it? Chant this mantra. Okay. You know, it's so simple. But if your mind is tricky and you're not a truthful person, then you can weave this whole nonsense story around it that somehow turns it into its own opposite. And that's what they've done. And so the devotees are not making progress. They're not attaining realization. Huh? I mean, there's a couple of devotees on our forum who have been chanting as long as I have, but they're not realized. Well, why not? What's different about what they did and what I did? I attained realization and they didn't. We all started out just as from the same place. So that means that there's some misunderstanding that has crept into the minds and hearts of most of the devotees. How did that happen? It could only have happened one way, through the leadership. They were not projecting an accurate picture of Śrīla Prabhupada's instructions. So the devotees in general could not follow the process accurately. Because they didn't follow, they didn't get the result. See? You have to know what consciousness is, and you have to know how to work with consciousness. And this is an area where we have done a lot of research. So we want to encourage everybody to actually work directly on their consciousness. And, you know, we have so many articles in the whole website and so many videos and so many, I mean, we spent hours and hours and hours discussing this. So if you go back and look at those early videos, and especially our papers on transontology and stuff like that, this explains everything. In the West, we don't have a very clear idea of consciousness, even though consciousness is the basic fact of life. Without consciousness, everything else is useless. It's finished. Zero. So, because consciousness can't be measured, it's not an objective phenomenon, it's a subjective phenomenon. You know you're conscious, but you can't actually directly prove to anybody else that you're conscious. You can know what the contents of your consciousness are, but nobody else does. See? That means consciousness is intrinsically subjective, individual, and separate. So there's no such thing as a collective unconscious or any of that nonsense. See? People have to know what is the actual science of consciousness. Consciousness is Brahman. Brahman is the energy of Krishna. It says very clearly in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti Shapyate, that the Supreme Absolute is called Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. See? So you always have the individual spirit soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the relationship between them. And the natural relationship of the spirit soul to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is servitude. We're all servants of God. Just like the sunshine and the sun. So it's so clear. It's just so, it has been so distorted by people who didn't understand and who assumed positions of power without qualification, and then misled themselves and their God brothers to justify that position of power. You see? That was the motivation. You want to understand, why did these people distort the philosophy? Why did they distort Śrīla Prabhupada's instructions? It was because they wanted to justify their position of power. Well, we're not self-realized. No, we're not. But we can have this position because, after all, it's impossible to become self-realized in one lifetime. Therefore, we might as well, take this position because we're somehow or other representing Śrīla Prabhupada. I mean, it's a whole involved, I don't understand it myself. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I can't really do a very good job of presenting their arguments. But somehow or other, they wanted everyone to accept them as being a representative of Śrīla Prabhupada, even though they didn't actually understand, and they admitted that they didn't understand Śrīla Prabhupada's instructions. Now, how do you figure that?
They admitted?
Yeah. Yes?
Question from Mike.
Okay.
Is there a danger of getting stuck in devotional service in ecstasy? When one has made the decision to get to devotional service in pure love of Godhead, there is still a huge desire to get past the ecstasy stage, no matter how good it feels.
Yeah. In the beginning, you get ecstatic symptoms and stuff like that, and the tendency is to want to relish those ecstatic symptoms. But in the stage of pure love of Godhead, one goes even beyond the ecstatic symptoms to enjoying Krishna's enjoyment. See? Because if I relish ecstatic symptoms, then I'm enjoying my enjoyment. But that's not love. Pure love of Godhead means I enjoy when Krishna enjoys. Now, this doesn't mean that one deprives himself of enjoyment, because actually you enjoy more. We automatically enjoy when Krishna enjoys, because Krishna is present within our hearts. When we're happy, where does that happiness come from? Does it come from outside? Huh? Most materialistic people think so, but that's an illusion. What it really comes from is inside. One has a certain desire, then he gets that desire, and then he thinks, now I am happy. You see? So the happiness comes from inside in any event. And in real happiness, when we have spiritual happiness coming from Krishna, then the source of happiness is Krishna within our heart. Try to understand. So when we experience devotional service, ecstasies due to devotional service, they come from inside. Every kind of happiness comes from inside, but especially happiness due to devotional service. So Krishna is there in our hearts. He's giving happiness and distress, memory and forgetfulness, knowledge and